Hello, mathematicians. We are going to be going over the questions from the Nelson Grade 12 Advanced Functions textbook, Chapter 1.1, Question 1 on page 11. These questions are all asking you to state the domain and range of each relation and then determine whether or not it is a function, and then to justify your answer. So in order to answer this question, we must recall what a domain is. Domain refers to all of the x values in a relation or a data set. The range is all of the y values in a data set or a relation. And functions, the easiest way for most students to think about it is that it passes the vertical line test. That only works though if you can get a visual on the graph. So often if you don't know it just by mentally thinking of it, you might actually have to sketch the graph. So the first question has an actual image of the graph. You don't have to worry about sketching it. They do that for you. And the domain is all of the x values. So the x values, of course, are the numbers along this axis. And as you can see, because of the arrows on either side, you know this is continuing on forever. So the domain is that x is the element of all real numbers. So you just simply write it as that because it includes all the numbers from negative infinity to positive infinity. And so that's how we would write it as mathematicians. The next, you're looking at the range, which are the y values. So you're going to start with the lowest value. It goes as low as -4 and goes as high as -2. So that means that the range goes from -4. So -4 is less than or equal to y. And y is also less than or equal to 2. So that just keeps it within this range. So it is greater than -4, but less than -2. So just remember when you're doing a range, you use the y here. And if you remember to use the less than signs, you simply can go from the lowest value to the highest value. And then to determine if this is a function or not, you're going to see if it passes the vertical line test, which of course it does. So you'd say, yes, it's a function. The justification is it passes the vertical line test. That is an appropriate and a sufficient justification. Next question, so question 1b, has another graph for you. This one does not have arrows on it though, so this graph does not continue. So when it comes to the domain, that's the x values. It goes from -1 to +7. So we are going to write that as going from -1, x is -1 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 7. So it ranges from -1 to +7. Again, always using the less than signs. And if you do that, you go from the lowest value to the highest value. The range, then of course, looking at the y values, the lowest value is a -3. The highest value is a 1. So you would write it going from -3 using the y. That's one thing students get tripped up on. They start getting used to using x. So you guys make sure that you are telling your teacher that you are referring to the y values and they are also less than or equal to 1. And then, is this a function? Does it pass the vertical line test? Absolutely it does. So it's a function. The justification again, it passes the vertical line test. Question 1c gives you a list of coordinates. So you have to look at this a little closer. Now, of course, you could get a piece of graph paper out and draw these coordinates out, but since that does take a little bit of time, we're going to try and think about this mentally. So I'm going to add here that functions can also be thought of as having the x value has only one y value associated with it. This one is helpful to keep in mind if you don't have a sketch. If you are not confident with this understanding of functions, sketch the graph out so you can actually see it, especially if you're a visual learner and you're not confident with understanding how to test for functions. So if you do have a good grasp of it and you can think about it either as passing the vertical line test or as having only one value for each x value, then we can simply use that so we don't have to worry about sketching it out. But here we can see that there is a repeated x value and they have different y values. So that doesn't pass this definition of a function where the x value has only one y value. The x value has two possible y values. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we obviously know this is not a function. The domain, however, is what we're going to be looking at the x values. The x's range from 1 all the way to 4. So that's what we're going to write. 1 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 4. For the range, we're going to look at the y values. They range from -5 to 11. So we're going to write that as the range varies, or has a range of -5 to 11 with y in the middle using your less than or equal to signs. So the format, you want to be consistent every single time so that you're not making mistakes. So that's why we're always going to use the less than equal signs to write our domain and range. And that's just proper form as well. Don't deviate from that form by using like switching this around to say 4 is greater than or equal to x is greater than or equal to 1, like kind of just flipping it to write it in reverse. It is mathematically correct, but it's just poor form. Always write it this way using these signs. So make that a habit. So is this a function? We already discussed that. No, it is not a function. And your justification, if you were to sketch it, you can say that it doesn't pass the vertical line test. But if you're not going to sketch it, your justification is going to be that there is more than one y value for each x value, or for a given x value. And you can list it, for example, the two coordinates 1 and 4 and 1 and 9 has means that when the x value is 1, there's more than one possible y value. It is a little tricky to kind of wrap your head around that, but it is important if you want to be getting into the higher levels of understanding. On a test, you'll probably have to have a decent understanding of how to approach it with that other understanding, other than just the visual, does it pass the vertical line test? Next question, 1b, has a algebraic expression. You should know that this algebraic expression is a linear equation because it's in the form of y equals mx plus b. That is review. If that is something that sounds new to you, you might have to go back and check out some review materials that I'll post in the description of the video. But we should know that this is a linear equation. It is a positive correlation, so the line is going up to the right, and it's going up kind of steeply because the graph is has a coefficient here of 3. So in this case, we've done a quick sketch, so we can go ahead and kind of think about what this would look like if it was actually on a graph. Now, if it was on a graph, because this line is extending in both directions, the domain is going to keep going on in forever, in which case you'd say the domain is an element of all real numbers. So you'd write the domain as x is the element of all real numbers, XER. For the range, the same is true. The graph is going to keep going up higher and higher and higher, and lower and lower and lower, from positive infinity to negative infinity. So you would say that y is an element of real numbers, and that is how you would write the range. Is this a function? Well, does it pass the vertical line test? Yes, it does. It is a function. Justification is it passes the vertical line test. 1e, it has kind of like a table of values. I would liken that to a table of values. So what is the domain and range for this one? Well, again, the first set of numbers is your x values, the second set is your y. And so our x ranges from -4 to +2. So you would write the domain as -4 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 2. For the range, you're going to look at the smallest and highest numbers for the y values. They, of course, have 0 and 3. And so keeping with our regular format, we're not changing that. We're going to write it as 0 less than or equal to y less than or equal to 3. Okay, you don't even have to think of that in words. You might just visually start to understand it as 0 is the lowest number, 3 is the highest. So you're going to fill in the middle part the same way every time, using the same signs and using the appropriate variable, either x or y. Is this a function? We didn't graph it, so again, you want to be thinking of it as, is there only one y value for each x value? And that is true. There's only one value for each x value. There's nothing that's repeated. So we can say, yes, it's a function, and the justification would be each y value, or each x value has a unique y value. And there's one more here, and this is also an algebraic expression. We should recognize this as an upside down parabola. We know it's upside down because of this negative sign. We know it's also being stretched to be quite tall and skinny because of this 5 here, and we know it's a parabola because it's squared. So I've drawn a quick sketch. If you want to sketch it on your assignment because it helps you, I would absolutely encourage you to do that. I did not put it on a graph or on grid paper, but you can imagine that this would be the y-axis going right through the middle because it's not being translated up, down, or anywhere else. It's just being flipped. So this is still the y-axis that would be going along here, and the x-axis would be going right and skimming the top of this upside down parabola. So in this case, what is the domain? The domain are the x values. I should have arrows on here because this does go on forever, which means it's going to be getting wider and wider and wider and wider forever. So we can say that x is an element of real numbers. The range, however, it is never higher than 0. So you would say that the range, the y value has to be less than or equal to 0. So we don't have to put y in between two numbers because in one direction it still goes on forever. Is this a function? Yes, it is. The justification is it passes the vertical line test. And I think that's all we've covered for question 1. So make sure that you check out the videos if you're not clear on any of the review concepts that I said you needed to have a really strong understanding of. I'll have them in the description as soon as I make them. And good luck with the rest of your studying.